At 35, I've always been something of an enigma to those around me. People describe me as hard to read, my reserved nature often casting me as an outsider in social settings. My quiet demeanor isn't intentional, it's just how I've always been, preferring to observe rather than dominate conversations. But that quietness has come at a cost, especially in my marriage to Vivian, a woman whose polished exterior and elite family have always made me feel like I'm standing on the edge of her world, never fully invited in. 2 nights before her father's retirement party, Vivian's frustration with me boiled over. We were in our sleek modern kitchen, the kind that looked more like a showroom than a place where meals were made. She stood by the counter, her arms crossed, her perfectly manicured nails tapping against her elbow. "Marcus, you cannot embarrass me at this party," she said, her voice sharp with exasperation. "My family will be there. Everyone who matters. You need to act like you belong." Her words stung not because they were new but because they were so familiar. To Vivian, I was a liability, a man who didn't quite fit into her glittering social circle. She wasn't wrong to worry, at least from her perspective. Her family, her mother, Eloise, with her cutting remarks, and her sister, Danielle, who treated me like an afterthought, had always made it clear I was beneath them. I was the quiet, unassuming husband who didn't match the Langston family's pedigree. What Vivian didn't know, what I'd kept hidden from her for months, was that I wasn't just the outsider she and her family perceived me to be. I'd been working secretly for her father's company, Langston Medical Group, a once thriving enterprise that had been teetering on the edge of collapse. Her father, Graham Maddox, had brought me in discreetly, trusting my analytical mind to assess the company's decline. I wasn't just assessing, though. I'd been orchestrating a silent acquisition, negotiating with a larger firm to take over Langston Medical without anyone, especially Vivian, knowing. It was a delicate dance, one that required me to stay in the shadows, to let others underestimate me while I worked to save the company that bore her family's name. That secrecy weighed on me, not just professionally but personally. I'd always felt marginalized in Vivian's world, my voice drowned out by her family's expectations and her own need for control. At home, she'd dismiss my opinions, interrupt me mid-sentence, or laugh off my attempts to contribute to conversations about her family's business. "You don't understand how things work in our world, Marcus," she'd say, her tone patronizing. I'd swallow the hurt, telling myself it didn't matter, but it did. It always did. And then there was the other secret, the one I hadn't even admitted to myself until recently. Vivian had been cheating on me. I first suspected it months ago, when her late-night work meetings became more frequent. She'd come home smelling faintly of cologne that wasn't mine, her phone buzzing with messages she'd quickly silence. I didn't confront her, not at first. Part of me didn't want to believe it, and another part, the part that had grown used to being sidelined, felt like I didn't have the right to demand answers. But the signs were undeniable. There was a man, someone from her social circle, a charming executive named Julian who always seemed to linger too close to her at events. I'd seen the way he looked at her, the way she smiled back when she thought I wasn't watching. It wasn't just flirtation, it was intimacy, the kind that comes from shared moments I wasn't privy to. The retirement party was meant to be a celebration of Graham's legacy, but for me it was a crucible. That night I stood in the grand ballroom of the Langston estate, surrounded by Vivian's family and their high society friends. The chandeliers sparkled overhead, and the air was thick with the scent of expensive perfume and ambition. Vivian looked radiant in a sapphire gown, her laughter ringing out as she mingled with her family's inner circle. I, on the other hand, felt like a shadow, my dark suit blending into the background as Eloise and Danielle cast their usual dismissive glances my way. "Marcus, do try to smile," Eloise said at one point, her voice dripping with condescension. "You look like you're at a funeral." But then the moment came, the one I'd been working toward for months. Graham took the stage, his presence commanding the room. He spoke about the company's challenges, the near collapse that had threatened his legacy. Then he paused, his eyes finding mine in the crowd. "There's someone I need to acknowledge," he said, his voice steady. "Marcus Reed, my son-in-law, the man who orchestrated the acquisition that saved Langston Medical Group. Without his vision and tenacity, we wouldn't be standing here tonight." The room fell silent, then erupted in applause. Vivian's face froze, her eyes wide with shock. Eloise's mouth tightened, and Danielle's champagne flute paused halfway to her lips. For the first time, I wasn't the invisible husband, the outsider who didn't belong. I was the man who'd saved their empire. Graham beckoned me to the stage, and as I walked through the crowd, I felt the weight of their stares, not with judgment but with respect. I didn't say much when I reached the microphone, just a few words about teamwork and perseverance, but inside I was reeling. This was my moment, the first time I'd been seen for who I was. After the speech, Vivian found me near the bar, her expression a mix of confusion and anger. "Why didn't you tell me?" she demanded, her voice low but sharp. "You've been working for my father this whole time, and you kept it from me?" I looked at her, really looked at her, and for the first time I didn't hold back. "Why didn't I tell you?" "Because you never listen, Vivian. You've spent our entire marriage dismissing me, treating me like I'm less than you. You didn't want to know who I am. You wanted me to stay quiet, to fit into your world without making waves." I paused, my voice steady but laced with pain. "And while I was saving your family's company, you were with Julian, weren't you?" Her face paled, her lips parting as if to deny it, but the truth was in her eyes. She didn't speak and neither did I. There was nothing left to say. The confrontation wasn't loud or dramatic, but it was final. I walked away, leaving her standing there, the weight of her betrayal and my own liberation settling over me. In the days that followed, I moved out of our house. I didn't want a divorce, not yet. I needed time to figure out who I was outside of Vivian's shadow. I threw myself into my work at Langston Medical, taking on a visible role as a consultant, no longer hiding my contributions. I started speaking up, not just at work but in every part of my life, refusing to let anyone diminish me again. I saw Vivian only once after the party, at a coffee shop where we met to discuss logistics. She looked tired, her usual polish dulled. "I didn't mean to hurt you," she said, her voice soft. I didn't know how to be with someone like you." "Someone like me," I repeated, the words bitter but not surprising. "You mean someone who doesn't fit your mold. The problem is, Vivian, you never tried to see me. You wanted a version of me that didn't exist." I walked away from that meeting with a clarity I hadn't felt in years. I didn't need Vivian's approval, or her family's, or anyone's. I'd spent too long letting others define me, letting their expectations silence me. Now I was done with that. I found a small apartment in the city, a place that felt like mine, not a stage for someone else's life. I started reconnecting with old friends, people who valued me for who I was, not who I was married to. I even began writing, something I'd always loved but never pursued, pouring my thoughts into stories about identity and redemption. The pain of Vivian's infidelity still lingers, but it's not the sharp, consuming ache it once was. I've learned that true fulfillment doesn't come from being loved by someone who doesn't see you. It comes from seeing yourself, from standing in your own truth. I'm not the man I was a year ago, the one who let himself be marginalized, who stayed silent to keep the peace. I'm Marcus Reed, and for the first time I know exactly who that is.